Hospitality. It's a place where a lot of us have our first job, and it's where I've had a job for a really long time. I'm Dr. Helen Addison-Smith. I'm a research fellow at RMIT University. I'm working with the Fight Food Waste Collaborative Research Centre, looking at hospitality waste in small to medium-sized hospitality businesses, working with the big Professor Tania Lewis, as well as a great team. So the Fight Food Waste Collaborative Research Centre is a 10-year-long project, $120 million, and it's broken down into sector action plans where we take a deep dive into what is happening in particular sectors of society, because each of them has their own particular waste issues. So hospitality hasn't got the highest level of food waste in Australia. That privilege is left to households, but it does have a very sizable amount of food waste. And not only that, it really drives how we think and how we feel about food and our everyday food practices. The average worker in hospitality is somewhere between 22 and 25 years old, and the average amount of training they've had is none. The vast majority of Australia's hospitality businesses are small, and the vast majority of them are also financially precarious, especially in the post-COVID world. This means that looking for solutions within the hospitality industry really have to be practical, and they have to be something that engages the staff and the customers. So over the past year or so, we've been really taking a good hard look at people who are doing excellent work in this space, because we feel like the people on the ground really do have most of the answers that hospitality needs in order to make it a less wasteful industry. That means we've been hanging out with some awesome people and eating some awesome food. We've done workshops, interviews, and even dinner parties, working out how people feel about waste, what their daily practices are with waste, and what exactly they would need in order to make our food system more sustainable. So we talk to people from the whole of the food system. We've talked to farmers, different kinds of chefs, front of house people, and of course, the everyday customer and consumer.
I'm Angelica. I'm an environmental science student in environment and society. It's crazy what we're doing now, or just trying to save as much food as we can. It's like a new thing, which is so crazy because I grew up with it already. Like, thinking about it, there was no like, oh, different colored bins, or like there wasn't even the question of just throwing something out, especially with meat, like, or not wanting it part because it doesn't look good. Since I migrated here, it's more confusion, because why is there so much waste here? Because if you were to go to the Philippines, right, coming here and looking at food waste and like studying it, very confused. I'm like, why are people doing it? Because it's like so, it's just so obvious. It's just home cooking, basically. For me, it's just home cooking and then just showing people what I eat at home.
It's really interesting when it comes to food as well, because like the effortlessness of creating is part of the like imagining of what cooking is like, and then when cooking is not like that, everyone is like, what's happening?
I think with cooking there's also the time behind like the thinking and the like planning and all that, that's often like not shown at all, like
yes.
For cooking, even when they're cooking online, like they're not like when they gotta got their meal, when they went shopping, when they got the thing, like all of that time is not, can be bigger than the time of the actual cooking.
And then also the time that it takes to develop those skills, because of course anyone who's a good cook has spent much time cooking, you know, and so there's like that embodied time.
Instead of food surplus, for example,
Yes.
is really powerful, I think. In the sense, like, if it was food excess, we'd have the skills to change it into something. But if it's food waste, it's just an end product.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then how do you market food that comes from food waste?
Hospitality sells escape and it sells deliciousness, and we're not really enculturated to think of what we think of as delicious as something that emerges from a particular time and a particular place, but of course it is. What we decide to eat and what we decide not to eat changes a lot over space and time, and that has a giant effect on what we waste, because once we decide a particular part of an animal, a particular part of a vegetable is not delicious or is not interesting to us, that ends up on the scrap heap. But if we look back on the history of food, there's so many recipes and so many ideas that we can go back to re-enchant some of these offcuts, some of these bits and pieces of waste, or what we have called waste previously, in order to make them a delicious, exciting treat for us all again.
We still don't know exactly like who's to blame in a sense, because supermarkets blame consumers blame supermarkets, all these people blame everybody.
Getting to a solution, it's just sharing knowledge about what needs to be done and what can be done on a smaller scale. And then by that, just shifting mindsets into what really needs to be done in order to just achieve the goals, just of being less wasteful in terms of just actually working within a hospitality business, just talking about imperfect produce. Just not everything that you receive in the hospitality industry has to be perfect. It can be still work just fine. So just learning to shift, or just shifting what you're working with, just like everything that we've said before, like just putting it in supermarkets, for example. It's just like they have everything, it's beautiful and pristine, but that's a really bad sort of level to follow. Like we need to start working with things that are real. Like produce comes in many different shapes and forms.
And what's the role of social pressure in changing behavior? Apparently in the city of Seattle, they'll put a sticker on your bin if you have stuff in the compost bin that shouldn't be there. And so there's sort of this visible marker of you've done the wrong thing on your waste.
Part of the problem with hospitality is that a lot of people come at it as if it's just, can you carry 3 plates and can you cut up a chicken? That's kind of the perception of what hospitality is. And I think if you have that aspiring want to do better, then the guilt that if you don't do it is a positive thing because you're reaching for a positive goal.
Using Natura, where you don't have to go to different little small producers, where there is trust in a certain system that's been created, and so you use that trust. It makes invoicing much easier as well for them, so they don't have to go to lots of producers.
My mum's a grower. So she's always been mad green thumb. She's a phenomenal gardener and a great cook, and that I guess is led our lives as growing up with gardens. And my dad is a hunter and a fisher, and he loves to do all that sort of stuff. And then I'm a forager, so I like to just sort of fossick about and find things and learn about things. And it's just interesting, I think, when you start looking around at what is around you, what's available to sort of touch and smell and taste, and the urban environment is really interesting for me as a forager. There's always sort of bits and pieces like weeds and mushrooms and onions and different things growing around. For me, they go hand in hand because I like to grow what I eat. I like to be able to touch and feel what my ingredients before I get them in the kitchen, because I feel like there's a drastic separation between how food is grown and raised and then produced in a kitchen space.
We hear a lot that the food system is broken. And when you think of something that's broken, you think of something that needs repair, obviously, something that needs to be fixed quickly. But the thing about systems is they are always breaking, they're always falling apart. Everything always falls apart, but we need to maintain things, we need to put things back together again. And in that way, we need both foods and systems that allow us to do that. The ability to fix a machine, to have the ability to make our own compost, grow our own food, and to have the ability to share our food, to share our leftovers. And this is something that hospitality is really struggling with right now. It's not that hospitality folk don't want to be hospitable, it's that the bottom line, the margins for a lot of people are very, very slim. And that there's a lot of either perceived or real risk around letting leftovers go or letting leftovers be transformed into something else that is delicious.
I think it all comes back to training consumers. Yep. Because our consumers are what lead us things that people do are lost skills. Yep. So many things they do are lost skills that actually maybe there are people in the community that provide that to your business, but there's this disconnect between commercial and non-commercial. I wonder if there is this idea of rating businesses based on their commitment to paying super, people, on being ethical, dealing with their food waste.
It comes back to educating consumers. They have no idea what kind of people.
They don't understand.
I think it's about participation, isn't it?
What we do at Good and Fugly is we provide families with fruit and veg boxes that are full with seasonal produce. And what we do is we pack them full of fruit and veg that doesn't make it into the supermarket shelves and is supposed to be wasted. So the stuff that is too big, too small, the colour's a little bit off, or the farmer has too much or not enough, then they can't give it to the supermarkets, and the supermarkets are going to reject it and waste it. We take it off their hands and we pack it in these boxes, and they go straight into fridges for people to enjoy. We've got a lot of pumpkin. A lot of pumpkin is just too big or it's too small. We get a lot of zucchini, a lot of eggplant, a lot of things that go off pretty quick, and we need to take from the farmers really fast to make sure that it gets in boxes and it's not wasted. Some of the supermarkets, they take weeks and weeks and weeks to get from the farm to the shelves. Some of our fruit and veg is picked on a Tuesday and in a box on a Wednesday. So we speak to our farmers and our growers really regularly so that the amount of time in between picking and eating is minimal. So a lot of the stuff that we get is rejected for lots of different reasons. These carrots, for example, they've been cut off, okay, and that's why the supermarkets don't want them. But shave that little bit off, give it a clean, that is as good as any other carrot you'll find in the market. These oranges as well, these small splits in the skin render this not good enough, not the right spec, so it's going to be wasted, okay? That little part, as soon as you chop this up, juice it, eat it, it's going to be just as good. There is no reason to waste this at all. So just recently, just this last week, we've saved 900 kilos of organic oranges from being wasted just because they didn't meet spec, they were too small, and also 400 kilos of avocados just because, again, they didn't meet spec. Organic produce as well, it's a lot harder to meet the spec. So they were going to go straight back into the ground. We took them, and within 24 hours, they were being packed in boxes and sent out.
Whenever you talk to chefs and say like, why wouldn't you compost? They're just like, oh, it's too inconsistent. People aren't going to come, like they come sometimes and then they don't, and you know, sometimes they don't leave the buckets and then it gets all stinky and then it's a problem for workplace health and safety and the neighbours hate it. And so we developed a system where it's a service, it's a bin service. We come at the same time every single week, but you have to pay for it. Yeah. Because also in the kitchens, like often the first thing people think about is like, oh, that's so complicated, like if you're separating things out. But realistically, as you would know, in a kitchen, you don't just prep one onion and then peel an orange and then chop up a stalk of broccoli or whatever it is. You're going to do heaps all at the same time. Yep. So if you're chopping up onions, you get out the orange bucket, you put that in front of you, and you put all the skins in the orange bucket. If you're prepping kale and you've got to put stalks in the bucket, you get the green bucket and you put all of the stalks in there. So it doesn't have to be as complicated as what. So it's actually not that complicated, and if anything, it makes it way better because you're actually thinking about it, and that's the main thing for us, is that we're changing the way that people think about what they're throwing out or what they would normally be wasting. Yeah. Often when you're throwing things in a bin, it just magically disappears. Like the bin man comes and collects it every week, or you know, every few days, whatever it is, and it just disappears. Like, so you don't ever see. So you don't ever actually see how much it is that you're throwing away, but as soon as it's like in like buckets like that, and so you're actually seeing how much you're throwing away, and I think it's really important, especially for chefs that are business owners as well. That's money that's going in the bin.
We're an open, accessible space for people. We're a demonstration site. We're an education centre and urban farm, basically. And so people come to series for different things. Yeah, whether it's to do a workshop or a program or volunteer or just buy a coffee. And I think for thinking about our community food system, the thing that would stand out, I suppose, for you both is that we're both our own wholesaler. and our own retailer. So we have our own businesses buy from each other, and it's all integrated. Propagate the seedlings, we grow the seedlings are sold at our businesses, available on a plate at the restaurant. At the other end, we're composting, and so we're trying as much as possible to demonstrate what a circular economy closed system could look like.
You could go into the supermarket and see 2 pieces of camembert. One will have a best before date and one will have a use by date. Exactly the same product. So if it's got a use by date, it can't be sold after the date, which means that it has to be heavily discounted leading up to the use by date. If it had a best before, we could still sell it after date. Even major retailers, if they chose to, could still sell it over the date if they wanted to. They don't. An important part of reducing food waste, I believe, is a major overhaul of the use by date and best before date system that we have. The biggest reason is that large manufacturers and large supermarkets, they like turnover. Most people take a cheese home and it's best before the 7th of September. A lot of people won't eat it. They'll throw it in the bin, and what do? They go and buy another one. There's no requirement to put a date whatsoever. There's no law. They choose to. So you have to ask, why do they put a date on it? Manufacturers now use it more as a turnover tool rather than a guidance for the safety and edibility of the product. They could just simply give it away in their stores to anyone who wants it. And it takes out all of that transport and administration and the nightmare of actually the process of giving products away to a charity. For example, in France, they made it illegal to throw out any food waste. That has had an amazing effect on the supermarket industry, in that they have now become community centres. They are loved by the community because they're giving products away to people every day. Compare that to the reputation of the 2 big supermarket chains here.
And not just thinking about at council level or state level, but at builder levels, builders that build across the country, and if they are regulated in a certain way, they can be the scaling up rather than doing it site-wise.
We were talking about sensory knowledge and almost the idea of sensory education, because we were talking about, for example, I learned, that if you make mayonnaise from scratch in a kitchen here, you have to throw it out at the end of the day, for example, even though it would be better, it would be good the next day. So these sort of regulatory constraints that contribute to food waste. We also talked about expiry dates as another example, right? And how people have come to kind of rely on those as a proxy for what is good, and maybe losing touch to some extent with does it smell okay? Does it taste okay? Like those kinds of things. Where does that kind of awareness come from, such that it could probably contribute to reducing waste?
We were thinking about hospitality buying ugly food. The fact that we may inadvertently be increasing egg waste by the types of things that we're selecting.
As everything is, the food system is fundamentally interconnected with how we all go about our everyday life, and it reaches all the way through from farming to cooking to eating to how we dispose of that waste, and hopefully how it's used to grow more food. So we're always fundamentally interrelated, and that is something that we really spent a lot of time looking at in this research project. It's not useful to think of hospitality as completely siloed off from the rest of the world. Apart from anything else, it makes its literal bread and butter from inviting people into its spaces and really engaging them with the practices of cooking food and what it means to eat delicious food.
Learning just to almost take an extra step or process before just throwing something straight into the bin. So with the onion peels, for instance, we keep them, dehydrate them overnight so that they're really dry, and then blitz them into a powder and use that as a seasoning. At home, I would most likely throw that out. It's all about not being lazy and almost just stopping for a second and being like, okay, how can I use this again? So just putting an extra thought into the food cooking stage. Like, it's just, it's taking that moment to go, okay, what can we do with this? Like, yes, my brain's like, I'm going to put it in the bin, or I'm going to put it in the compost, because that's the easiest and generally the most walked path of food. But yeah, we're just all taking that minute to go, okay, what else can we do? We're also educating them to let us know about that sort of stuff. Like, oh, customers aren't really liking the onion salad, so maybe don't make it anymore. Just letting front of house know like what we're doing and what that means and what you can say to the customers. But I guess in a busy Saturday service when most people that are working are casuals, you're not going to get that. Like, I don't know, that breakfast brunch environment, you just don't really have that opportunity to describe the food as much as you would maybe in like a dinner setting, because that was part of the training for the front of house staff, is to be able to converse with customers and have conversations and tell them what's going on. Yeah, educating ourselves as well on what we can do would be good. And then further educating our staff, our front of house staff, on what we do. Like, again, that's something that we would love to sit down and show them what we do and educate them on what we're thinking and why we've got certain things on the menu or why we're doing these, what it means, so that they can then pass on that message. But once again, time and money.
The last sort of, I reckon, 15, 20 years, there's been a huge increase in wages and a really significant push for appropriate pay. The skill level has reduced because industry has become mechanised, and so that's kind of, it's forced the labour content out of food, and it's given people like cut steaks and already processed and butchered fish. It takes a lot of the waste away from the restaurants and pushes it back into the sort of bulky industry. It's also reduced the skill set of the labour that you do have, so it reduces the capacity to do anything with what you've got. So I think because of that, people are less aware of where their food's coming from and what it looks like whole, and how to butcher and how to fill it and all those sorts of things. For me, like, I grew up growing and fishing and hunting and understanding that process from a very young age, and so for me that's ingrained in who I am as a person and how I cook. But I think a lot of people skip that step and they just go straight into bringing things out of packets, or like ordering things and it just arrives as chicken breast, or it just arrives as fish fillets and it's got no bones and it's got no skin. And that's wonderful for the owners who don't have to pay the labour of all those things and the wastage, but it's also, it's a loss of a skill, I guess. It's a changing world. I think people lose the tactility of what they're doing. So they lose the sort of appreciation of what it's come from and to what it is and how long it's taken to farm that produce or that animal. And I think when you have less appreciation for the whole beast or the whole vegetable, then you lose a connectivity with it. So you're only connected to one piece of the animal. So like if it gets wasted, you're like, oh, it's just a chicken fillet, but it's not actually just a chicken fillet. Like, that farmer has raised that bird to get to that point, to then butcher that bird, to then for you to get that piece. But then if it goes off because you haven't cared enough about it because it's just a chicken breast, then like there's a loss of connectivity to the whole process when you're getting one piece of the pie. You don't see the bigger picture, and I think that is damaging people's appreciation, which is why we've ended up in a world where there's a lot of waste.
In Australia, food waste is absolutely tied to food relief. We have a giant amount of food waste in Australia that is picked up and used by our food relief organisations. And we're living in times where the cost of living crisis has really hit, the rental crisis has really hit, and of course more and more people are having to access food relief. So there's a complex set of politics there about who gets to eat what, and whether one group of people who are food insecure have to eat the waste of another group of people, those of us who are currently not food insecure. And a bigger question than that is, when you are food insecure, do you have not only the right to food, but the right to pleasure, the right to delicious food? For a long time, the Australian food relief sector, because of its constant struggle to keep on going, has really been looking at how to get calories into people, how to stop people being hungry. But often people have felt that they're not being fed in the deepest of possible ways. But if we agree that humans have the right to food, do we also agree that they have the right to delicious food? Do they have the right to pleasurable food? Do they have the right to sit down with people that they know and care about and share food?
My name's Savannah and I am a member of Just Food Collective. For the next 2 years we'll be doing a project called Well Fed, and we've got an aim to feed about 10,000 students for the next 2 years. And the reason we're doing that is because we did some research last year that revealed that 44% of the students at the institute were food insecure. So they didn't have enough money to buy food that was sufficient for their lifestyle or for their diet. Today we're collecting all of this amazing produce that is basically seconds, so things that the supermarkets or other suppliers wouldn't really want to take because maybe they look a little bit wonky, or they're too big, or maybe a bit soft or underripe, maybe a bit overripe. And so with all of that produce, we package it up into bags and give it out for free to students.
Yeah, so the onus is always on the service to update. There's no one going out looking.
And there's no way that you can directly update.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is tricky because community meals that are secular, often, yeah, someone's sick, doesn't happen, food doesn't get delivered, doesn't happen, school holidays, there's heaps of variables.
Yeah.
How do we get people who still want to hold their values in terms of what they purchase but can't quite afford us? To that, there's different entry points.
Yeah.
You know, like having a tiered price structure for a workshop or for an event or for an online delivery. You don't want to close the door on people.
The relations that we have in the food system are not just between food, they're also between people. And a lot of the waste that we see in the hospitality industry comes from it being such a high stress industry with people really under the pump, trying to squeeze profit out of what is not actually a very profitable industry. It was about 4.2% profit margins before the pandemic, and recent estimates are between 1 and 8% profit margins. So there's not a lot of fat to trim. So the relationships that hospitality owners have with their staff have become of utmost importance, because in order to train people on how to not waste food when you're prepping food, you're really doing something different from traditional hospitality training. And once you've done that training with them, you really want to retain them. So alongside chefs and hospitality owners looking at how to create more efficient, less wasteful practices, come the sense of wanting to create a healthier, more connected community within the kitchen as well. And this will stop the churn and burn of hospitality. It's an industry which has a notoriously high rate of burnout. And that lack of relatedness within the kitchen that comes from always having new staff, or always being under pressure, always being in fear of having your shifts cut or your job lost, means that it is sometimes hard to care about something that is not as pressing as food waste.
When you think of sustainability, you have to look at it as a holistic view. So that's what my research was about. It's like where you're eating, how you're interacting with people, and like the separation from farmers and the eater. It just makes you think different, and like obviously the food is one thing as well, but it's really your values. That's what is sustainable. That's sustainability. The separation from farmers, cooks, that's the biggest thing for me, I reckon, because since I grew up seeing the farmer, or the farmer was the neighbor, or the cook was my uncle, like I'm more like, I care about the food more. I feel like the problem is, like, since people are so separated, it's just like there's no interaction at all.
So I've always felt that I've been really good at building community from the get-go, and went in kind of with like this vibe of like, come to our place, this is our table, you know, and we're going to teach you along the way. And I felt like I've spent 12 years really kind of growing that and trying to educate my customers and also online by sharing everything that I do. So I'm super transparent with my customers about all the stuff that we do. Happy for people, you know, I give away all my recipes in the books. I, you know, share all my stuff on social media.
or whatever.
I think the community is a big part of what I do, at least. Bars have been for a long time, like that kind of third place.
Yeah.
You know, and we have different ones in different parts that's trying to fill different roles in the community. I think that's a hugely important part of what we've done.
People are approaching us because they want to, like at this point, when we first started about 8 years ago, we had to convince people to say, you're a hospitality business, you have to take responsibility for your shit. But at this point, people are contacting us because they want good local produce, and they know that their customers are starting to care about what businesses they support and how good their sustainability practices are. And we can legitimise businesses' claims of sustainability. The more people talk about this type of thing, the more it becomes the norm, and other people realise that they could be doing it as well, they could be doing more, and also the customers can be empowered to spend their money in businesses that are actually doing something that aligns with their belief system, which is, it's empowering for everybody.
Having everyone on board and everyone understanding that this is an important thing for us and something that we're using as, I guess, a pillar to say that this is what cassette is.
Yeah.
So we almost hold each other accountable to it.
Yeah.
Like the other day, like I really wanted to, like we just had a lot of prep to do, and I had a lot of, I guess, parsley stalks, and I'm like, what am I going to do with these? And then even one of the casuals was like, no, we'll keep it, we'll dehydrate it, we'll use it. And even though it's like something that we still are doing, like it definitely is hard.
It's hard work running a hospitality business. It really is. Yeah. Would we open one today? Yeah, because it meets a customer need. It brings people to the site. It's a gathering place. And what it does for us is it reflects our food system to people. So it's an easy conversation to have with someone when you're sitting over a meal, to then go the taste, the this, the that, to then link it back to how it's grown.
Yeah.
So I think it's an easy access point. We don't have a charge. You can just come in.
Oh yeah.
And people come for different things. Some people don't know all of the things that are happening. They just want to go sit by the dam and have a coffee or read a book or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then people lift up corners and go, oh, I didn't realise that there was this and that.
Yeah.
So the focus has always been about supporting and showcasing local produce, organic produce, ourselves and other farmers, direct relationship with the farmer, and says, I'm thinking of exploring this on the menu, do you think you could grow that? We have been lucky over our time and through our different operations to build relationships with our farming community and our producer friends. We know their practices. He maintained those relationships with the farmers season in and season out. And that's the difference, I suppose, to your big monopoly who don't give that security. And so we stayed with, sorry Paul that your cashews didn't come in this season. We'll see you next season, we'll just buy what you have. Knowing each farmer and their story and their history, and so it's branching out in different ways on that. It's finding the right people for the right roles too. We've been really appreciative of our chefs who've come in and either have knowledge about seasonality and permaculture practices or want to know, and that's how they end up here.
Well, the design's kind of like, you're kind of learning the farm designer, where you can move things and fill gaps where you need to.
Yeah.
So, you've got sandwiches that can change whenever you need to be. It's not the written menu is sort of a guide, as opposed to being that is what we have.
Yeah.
Because like the spanakopita we make, that as long as there's it's a green thing, it can go in it. You can kind of use whatever greens you need. So it's about creating dishes that are open to change.
Yeah.
Talking these conversations with people who are like-minded, like talking to your nonna, talking to a lot of older relatives, discussing those things.
Yes.
Because and through kitchens, like fermentation's become a bigger thing lately.
Yeah.
Like quite popular in quite fancy restaurants.
Yeah.
And so that knowledge previously used to be, there's a lot of gatekeeping with that knowledge 10 years ago, 12 years ago. But now it's people are happy to talk about it. People are happy to give recipes out. People are happy to try and share that knowledge to make other people, make them enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah.
But in order to keep those people interested and excited, you need to be doing some interesting things.
Yes.
And you need to keep their minds active. It's about having these conversations and someone having a good idea and someone having another good idea and just sort of making it slightly better. And if everyone's making it slightly better, there's a movement towards a better space.